Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. January 6th at 7 p.m. That's Monday night is our next live show. That's at Tuttle's. And Anthony, just once, it would be nice to do this podcast and actually talk more about the team than the injuries. And this team just cannot catch a break. Obviously, Kaprizov is missed the last 3 games and is not on the road trip here in Washington. And then continuing on to Raleigh. They still say day to day and that this is nothing to be alarmed about. They just want to get him right. We could talk about more in a minute. But, man, this Jared Spurgeon injury looks like it is a major potential problem, a long-term injury. He's having an MRI on Thursday. The Wild sometimes, aren't the most transparent when it comes to injuries, but hopefully we get some sort of at least timetable on how long he's going to be out.
Yeah, it didn't look good.
No.
And a dangerous play, a reckless play, a stupid play, an uncalled for play by a guy with a history, which is unfortunate that you put. Sometimes when you start to talk about injuries, you can say, okay, well, the guy plays this style of game or he's this point in his career where you have to start to wonder. This had nothing to do with any of that.
No.
There's nothing Spurgeon could do to put himself in a better spot to avoid this. It was just a young player making a really bad decision. And you certainly hope that everything turns out okay for Jared. Who knows what?
I get the impression
but
that the initial prognosis, and again, this is just the impression I'm getting, that it was a lot better than it could have been. Like that it's a lot better than they initially thought, but it's still going to be time. So that is good. Joe Smith, my colleague from The Athletic, saw him leaving the arena yesterday on crutches and wearing a large brace on his right leg, including a boot. So, I don't know what he's dealing with. Don't even want to guess, but the boot would tell you that it's something, lower. And hopefully not multiple injuries, but they're going to have an MRI on Thursday and we'll see. And to your point, I mean, this kid, LaRue, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it exactly right. 21 years old. This isn't just a bad decision by a kid. This is a kid that makes these decisions all the time. These are decisions.
This isn't his first bad decision.
Like he's been suspended 9 times in the Quebec League and twice in his very brief AHL career. Leads all rookies in hits. Is trying to play a hard game, but clearly he's either dirty or he just does not know how to lay
playing
it.
A hard game is different than being dirty.
Yeah.
And there's no place in the league for guys like that, for guys that make that kind of decision. And I don't know this kid at all.
Yeah.
And I haven't watched Nashville play a lot, so I don't know what his normal game is. But I got the sense last night that the Predators were not happy. They're in a position to win the game, a game they had to have.
He turned the entire game around.
And he turned the game the other way. They all have some respect for Jared Spurgeon, the coaching staff, even if you just talk about the coaching staff. And they know that there's no place in this game for hits like that and plays like that and decisions like that. And if you're not smart enough to know better, then there's no place in this league for you. And I know that he'll get suspended, and the suspension will never match what Jared Spurgeon misses. But and we can go around and around on better ways to discipline guys like that. I know they can't use his previous record in the length of this suspension. They can only use NHL, and he's not a multiple time offender yet. But not yet, right? And so I don't know. It was really hard to watch.
And that's the unfortunate thing. Like his history says that he's going to hurt somebody else. Right. I mean, that's.
And even did you watch? I know you weren't at the game last night, so I'm assuming you were watching on television. Yeah. Did you see the shot of him skating across the ice after he left the penalty
proud
box?
Of himself.
He absolutely left thinking, I've put my stamp on this game. That was, and I might be unfairly judging,
but that is the face that he made.
Exactly.
100%.
I saw the face and I thought, that's not a guy who's skating away with remorse.
And I talked to a couple people today, scouts, not affiliated with the Wild, that say this was his MO in juniors too. Is that he was constantly proud of himself. I mean, he did a story last year in Nashville where he said suspensions are part of the game, like he's talking about injuries or something, or turnovers, or he needs to, be awoken by people close to him to stop this if he wants to have a career. And he is just, regardless of what it does to the Wild, Like the fact that Jared Spurgeon is now going to deal with this major injury
Right.
is just
when
absolutely
he just got
BS,
done
man.
rehabbing from. Now, I get it; it's unrelated, and hopefully this is not anything that causes problems for the rest of his career. But what if it did?
Yeah.
You're talking about a guy that's at the late stages of his career, 900 games in the NHL, and now you're going to put him in a spot where he's got to try and rehab from an injury after he just spent 9 months rehabbing from the previous injury.
I was just going to say, do you remember, but I know you do because you were with me when I found out in Anaheim once what was going on with Ryan Suter. And remember, I mean, what it reminded me of was that talus bone injury that Suter had, that when you did a bunch of research on that injury, it was career-threatening.
Right.
Now, Suter's done an amazing job of coming back and playing a long time since that injury. That was 2018. So clearly it didn't threaten his career, or I mean, it was career-threatening, but it clearly he got a great doctor that obviously put him back together again. But that's what it reminded me of. Like, these things are major, and for him to go both feet first into the boards, and this kid, like, maybe he just needs to learn how to check, but nobody in their right mind going into the boards takes their left leg and, to me, looks very intentionally,
absolutely
puts
looks
it
intentional.
right on both his legs and
slew
sweeps
foot both legs.
I mean, it is the definition of a slew foot. It just the Wild were incensed after the game. Like, Bill Guerin wanted to talk to the media. He was so pissed off, and finally just did not. And they have every right to be that you know, a nothing player on a last place team that probably shouldn't even be in the league absolutely does this to their captain on a team that right now it doesn't have Jake Middleton and doesn't have Kirill Kaprizov and just can't catch a break with injuries.
Just got Eriksson Ek back, just got Brodin back. It is amazing. And to go back to the way you opened the show, that's been the story of this team. But I think it also has been one of the most impressive traits of this club is that in spite of injury, we're not talking about injuries to guys like Zach Leroux. We're talking about injuries to the two of the best three defensemen on the team, well, three of the best four. Spurgeon, Brodin, and Middleton have all missed time. We're talking about missing the most irreplaceable center on the roster in Eriksson Ek, the best player on the roster in Kirill Kaprizov, the best power play guy on the roster in Matt Zuccarello. These guys have all missed at least 6 to 8 games this year, and yet they have not let anything faze them. They're playing $15 million under the cap, so they don't exactly have a flush roster like some other teams would have, and yet they have just remained unfazed, unflappable, just nose to the grindstone, let's go, and found ways to keep themselves in the top 5 in the NHL for most of the year.
And last night was a great example of that, where their power play has been in a funk for 5 weeks. And what do they do after starting with that Leroux penalty? They scored the first of their 3 power play goals in the game to win the game. With you know, the whole next man up mentality, Jared Spurgeon's going to be out for a while. We don't know exactly how long, but Carson Lambos is going to be called up. He's going to most likely make his NHL debut against the Capitals, which means that most likely Chisholm or Brodin move to the right side. And
we've seen Brodin on the right a lot earlier in his career.
Yep.
His skating ability certainly would lead you to believe that he can handle that. And I think you have to, because you can't continue to play he and Faber together, especially on the road right now with all these other guys
How do you
out.
think the pairs will align?
I would guess that you have to split those two guys up to start with. And,
so Chisholm with who and
you know, I mean, Bogosian's probably on the third set then, because if Brodin's going to play the right, that means that you've got Bogosian as your third set right man. So Chisholm is in your top 4 for sure. Merrill's probably on your third set, and that would Merrill would actually probably have to move up. So Merrill's going to play with one of those guys, and then Lambos with Bogosian.
Yeah. Unless you went Lambos and Faber and just said, you know, like this kid that's 22 years
Yeah,
old, hey, mentor the 21-year-old.
Right. You might do that and just play Merrill and Bogosian together as your third set.
You know, I mean, frankly, you could go Chisholm, Faber, and play Sato Brodin, who we know can mentor anybody.
Exactly.
That
That's
could be
actually
Lambos.
probably how they'll
Lambos,
land,
Brodin.
as I think about it. Just if it's me, I keep Merrill and Bogosian together. And now they're probably going to play more than they've played as a normal third set, and there are going to be some spots where game situation's going to dictate. We're going to see Faber and Brodin together sometimes, but you can't go into a game on the road
against Ovi,
either here or in Carolina on this trip, and say, "Hey, we're going to play Faber and Brodin together," unless you're going to play them for 37 minutes.
I joked with somebody today that would be the only way they'd stay together. That's hilarious. So Lambos has been playing much better in Iowa. Originally I thought David Juracek would get the try. That actually seemed to be the plan as of this morning, and then they've changed it up. So maybe they talk with the coaching staff on how they want to do it.
I wouldn't have done that. I like what they've done with Juracek. It's similar to what they're doing with Ogren. It's similar to what they did with Boldy. It's similar to what they did with Rossi. Let those guys go down there and solidify their game. This doesn't mean that Carson Lambos has passed David Juracek in their eyes as a prospect or anything. It just means that right now he needs time. He needs a ton of minutes. And to bring him up here and force him into a spot where it might not be his ideal role in the NHL, might be playing 10, 12, 14 minutes a night. He seems like a guy that needs to play 20, needs to play on the power play. Go down there and perfect your game so that when you come up here, then you're ready to be an NHL player. And I talked with a few fans about this over the last few hours, actually. And I think when you look at what Billy Guerin chose to do with those three guys I just mentioned, we don't know yet with Ogren, but that certainly seems to be the plan. But it worked with both Boldy and Rossi to not force him. Think about how many times that first half of that season when Kevin Fiala was playing on a line that desperately needed another piece, and they kept saying, Boldy's the guy, but not yet. And it was after the first of the year when they made the call, and then down the stretch, those guys were terrific.
Yep.
But it allowed Boldy that full first half of a season to just go down there and dominate. Perfect your game so that when you come up here, it's not an up and back and forth kind of situation. Now you're ready to be an NHLer.
Yeah, and Juracek, they've been really happy with how he's playing down there, his compete level, the fact that he's coachable. He scored his first goal on Tuesday night, but Lambos has been playing really well. And look, I mean, this is a first-round pick. It's his time, 2021 first-round pick. Let's see it. I don't think he's going to be the offensive guy that maybe originally we all thought that he could be, especially because he's such an elite skater. But his gaps are usually really good, and he just seems to be getting better and better and better. So Juracek right now stays down. That doesn't mean that he's going to be down for a while. Like, let's just say Lambos comes up and this doesn't, or they suffer another injury, but let's say Lambos comes up and this alignment right now at putting Brodin on the right and just doesn't work, then there just might come a point where it makes sense to have Juracek up, or even a David Spacek or somebody like that. So we'll see. But obviously, real disappointing news with Jared Spurgeon. Now let's get to Kaprizov here. Anthony has missed 3 games. Bill Guerin says that he's day to day. Reading between the lines, it's a groin injury. I think that it's that right now that they just feel that it's something that he's been dealing with for a while, just soreness. They believe, I think it's a minor strain, that just the way he pushes, he's just been dealing with a while, and they don't want this to add up to being something that is a problem a month from now.
And what a luxury they have right now. We've talked about this a few times on our show. I know we've talked about it on our broadcast. They don't have to force guys and rush guys back from injury. And not that they're punching playoff tickets already or anything, but imagine if this team's in Nashville's spot. They can't. There's no way you could leave Kirill on the sidelines, and it's play through everything right now. But because of the fact that they've put themselves in a good spot, be careful. Take advantage of that holiday break that they had, and I'm just going off what we saw going into the holiday break, and I certainly don't have any insight into what he's been dealing with, but his game wasn't suffering from whatever it is that's bothering him. So that would, based on that alone, I'm guessing it's not something major, and that a little rest here will hopefully allow him to come back, and when he comes back, be Kirill Kaprizov again. The only thing that's unfortunate about it, as soon as you take, let's say it turns out to be 6 games or 8 games or something, you're talking about a guy that had a legitimate chance to lead the league in scoring, in goal scoring, and that's going to be really tough. All it takes is an 8-game spot like that with the pace that these other guys are scoring.
Like Kucherov.
Now he's 10 points behind these guys already. And not that that's the most important thing, but it would have been fun to watch him make a legitimate run at the league scoring lead, something that just has never happened for the Minnesota Wild. He's the only guy who's ever finished higher than 12th in the league in scoring for the Wild, and he was 5th one time. And this year he had a legit shot to do that. Most important, obviously, is that he comes back healthy, because with him in the lineup, if all these other guys come back, we've seen Eck come back. Brodin certainly looks like he's fine right now. You get Middleton back. What they've been able to achieve with these guys out of the lineup has put them in a great spot where now get Kirill back, playing at the level he was early in the season, and I think we got a team that's got a shot to make a run in what looks to be more of a wide open West than maybe we thought coming into the season.
Although, actually, this isn't a great thing to say now after Vegas blew that game yesterday, but Vegas is just up until yesterday's game, they are on fire.
I agree.
And Winnipeg's starting to win again.
And I think Vegas is a challenging matchup for Minnesota, but they're not. The gap isn't that big.
Right.
I thought coming into the season, Dallas was a team that was different than the others in the Central, and they're clearly not. I still think they're one of the elite teams in the West. They might end up winning the West, but it isn't something where it would take something special to beat them in the playoffs. And I kind of feel the same way with Vegas, where I think they'd be the favorite, but it wouldn't be unheard of to see them get beat. Wouldn't be unheard of to see them get beat by LA or by Edmonton. Wouldn't be unheard of to see Minnesota or Winnipeg beat Dallas. I don't think the gap is very large between these teams, and they're all missing something. And Vegas might be the most complete team in the West, but I don't think they're invincible.
Isn't it crazy how many upsets there have been in the last week? I mean, Montreal going into places like Tampa and winning, Anaheim winning. It's.
Well, look at the East right now. The teams that are on the bubble or in a playoff spot. That Ottawa team that we just saw holding a playoff spot. Pittsburgh has all of a sudden started to win enough. Columbus is right in the thick of things, and Montreal's in the thick of things. It's going to be a good battle for those last couple playoffs.
Even here in the West, St. Louis is starting to play really well. Obviously, Utah got inched up to a playoff spot. They've lost a couple in a row. Calgary as well. So really interesting. Let's take a quick break.
When it comes to great steaks, it's all about the marbling. And there's a 1 through 12 scale for marbling that will measure what the quality is of the steak. And for Feller's Ranch Wagyu, it's some of the best you'll find. They won't sell their steaks unless they're at a marbling level of 6 to 10 on a scale of 12. It's some of the best steaks you'll find. Just for reference, USDA Prime can be called USDA Prime as long as it's at 3 or 4 on that same scale. This steak is some of the best I've had. You can find it at fellersranch.com. Their vans are in the cities every week. They can deliver it to you. There are also a couple of spots within the cities where you can pick it up. You won't be disappointed. If you're having a great meal and you want to have steak, there's no place to go that's better than Feller's Ranch.
Aquarius Home Services is your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water systems. I've had it in my house for years, and trust me, it's helped me eliminate all water hassles, which means softer skin, shiny fixtures, cleaner, softer laundry, and spot-free dishes, all with zero electricity. Connecticut provides worry-free water, peace of mind, no dials or timers to worry about, and it's amazing how little salt I use. Seriously, I've got like 10 bags in my garage if anybody wants any. Plus, under my sink, I have the K5 reverse osmosis water system for great tasting water and, most importantly, coffee, which, as everybody knows, is a must for any healthy sports writer. Right now, you can get up to 25% off a whole home system and start with a free water analysis today. Just go to AquariusHomeservices.com and you can schedule your free water analysis. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you. Back here, Worst Seats in the House, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. January 6th is our next live show. That is at Tuttle's. And then there is another show later this month at Elsie's that, of course, escapes me right now. I think, should I look this up, Anthony? I think it's January. Of course, I can't find it. So we'll figure it out by the time the next segment starts. I'm sure you know it off the top of your head, right?
I'm just checking my calendar right now.
Hopefully, Margot added it to your calendar, but I also might need her to add it to my calendar.
I'll see if I have it in the calendar. I might have it.
I think that she should add it to my calendar too.
I do. January 6th. Podcast.
I just
Russo,
said that.
LaPanta.
What else? It's the next
Tuttle's.
one.
The next one. Let me see if I can find January 22.
There we
go. Podcast LC's Restaurant and Bowling Center.
All right, that's cool. And then
See, I'm here for you. I got our schedule locked in.
Then we'll have a couple of pods in between, and then we got to figure out February because you and I'm gone for 14 days, I think, for the Four Nations, and then you're going out to Central America,
Costa Rica.
Yeah, very
exciting. It's going to be exciting. We're headed to. Apparently going to spend a couple days in the jungle.
Yeah, Arenal.
Do some zip lining.
Yep, and the hanging bridges. I've done that. Arenal is the active volcano there, but it's not like molten lava. It's like molten rocks that come out. It's really cool. Hot springs and stuff like that. And then I'm sure you're going to go out to the beaches and see the monkeys and things like that. You know, there's one bridge there when you're like, I think it's as you're going down like that San Manuel, I think it's called National Park down there. There's one bridge where you're driving over and all of a sudden you just see people on the side of the road just throwing chickens over the bridge. So you stop and you're like, what the heck's going on there? And you look down there and there's just hundreds of crocs.
I've heard about that.
Yeah.
Somebody else brought it up to me. I know absolutely nothing about Costa Rica. I know we're
awesome.
flying into San Jose.
Yeah.
And
flying to San Jose, get the hell out. Unless you're going to stop at the Marriott there, which is on a coffee plantation.
Yeah, I don't think we're staying at a Marriott anywhere. Yeah. But I'm very much a passenger on this trip. I have zero to do with the planning. I'm just showing up.
Yep. By the way, we haven't even mentioned we're doing this podcast from a closed Starbucks, but it looks like we could easily hop that counter and go grab a couple of
I'm an
of
expert
beans.
Americano maker, so I could whip one up for us.
This is like our dream, doing this from a closed Starbucks. We just happen to walk in here, and there you go. Let's talk about the Dallas Stars. We just mentioned them before the break. Man. Like, what was Pete DeBoer thinking the other day? I mean, it's one thing to have a practice when you're not supposed to, but then to volunteer it to a room full of media.
But I thought there were a few things there. I mean, number one, do you really think no player is ever going to mention it? I mean, you just can't do that. And he's been in the league long enough to know that. And yes, then the second part is, why in the world would you say it?
Yeah. What was crazy is that there were a bunch of reporters in there, and I wasn't down in there. Like, if I was sitting in there and heard him say it, I would have been like, "Oh, wait, what did you just say?" Oh, and immediately, I would have been right away knew that this was a problem. But the other thing is, I just don't the volunteer. That's what was so bizarre about it, because he should know. He's been a coach for 17 years, and look, this isn't the worst thing in ever. But the reality is, the rules are the rules. The standings, as you and I just discussed, are so freaking tight that teams shouldn't
I actually think the penalty should be more severe than
absolutely.
that. And it's like when Toronto a few years back said, we're going to fly at 12:01 to circumvent the rule that says you can't travel the day before. And some people, well, what matters if the players agree to it? Well, because I bet it wasn't unanimous, and now you're going to be the one guy in the room that says, wait, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And what about the next team that says, well hey, if they're doing it, we're going to do it? I think the penalty should be even more severe
absolutely.
than
that. Here's the thing that to me is the biggest problem with this, and why the PA should be the angriest over it, is that, Jake Oettinger flew to Minnesota and spent his entire Christmas break there and probably got on the last flight of the day back to Dallas on the 26th for the game on the 27th. And I guarantee all those vets did. But you know who couldn't leave or had to be back first thing on the 26th because they were supposed to, as Pete DeBoer said, be at practice? All the young kids.
Right.
So, part of this 3-day break is that these guys, if they want to go home, can. And you're saying to these guys, John Hines did not land in Minnesota on the 26th until 9 p.m. And so there's a great example, and that's usually what most players do, is that they land on either the last flight back the day before they can, or they're allowed to meet the team as long as it's on their expense. And these guys all had to be in Dallas on the 26th if you were going to be at that quote-unquote optional practice that did have a coach on the ice, reportedly.
It was bizarre to me to me, this is a competitive advantage, and I don't think a financial fine does enough. I think this is where you forfeit a draft pick or something that impacts you as an organization. That will put a stop to this. I mean, it's just stupid. You can't do it. And somebody knew without a doubt that what they were doing was illegal, and yet they just chose to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So it isn't,
and it probably would have gone totally without anybody knowing if Pete didn't volunteer it to the media. And I got wind of it, and then when it was not on their website, the audio, that's when I knew something was up. And right when I found out, I'm like, this is ridiculous. So,
yeah, I had heard about it. I wasn't in the room. I was standing down the hallway, and
I heard that the Wild found out about it in the third period and were incensed.
Well, somebody came walking out, and I was asked the question at one point, like, did the Wild practice during the break? And I'm like, you can't.
Yeah.
And they just kind of walked away. And then a little while later, I heard that the Wild had caught wind of it too, and it was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, they were not happy.
We've got the disadvantage of having to get on a plane at
these guys had to get up at 5 a.m.
Right, and where the Stars are at home, which is the dumb. I still think it is absurd that they, number one, I don't like it at all. But if you're going to do it, you can't have a team that's got a 2-hour and 20-minute flight on that morning. To try to go down. I mean, like Brodeen said, he got up at like 5:30 to get to the airport at 7, which means you got up at like 6:31. No, I actually got up early that day because we had gotten a text the night before that there were a whole bunch of planes scheduled to leave MSP at 7 o'clock, which was our flight time. So we want to try and get in front in the de-icing line, because even though we're on a charter jet, we don't take priority over when all those planes that are scheduled to leave at 7 o'clock get in the de-icing line. It's whatever time your plane gets in line, and we had a delay. We didn't take off much before 8 o'clock, but we were asked to be on the plane at 6:30. So I got up early that day to make sure. I was like, I'm not going to be the guy that strolls on and then we end up a few seats back or a few spots back in the de-icing line.
Wow, an hour delay at de-icing. That sounds terrible. But to your point, also $100,000 for a billionaire owner that owns Moxies.
I know it just doesn't.
So that's like finding you a bunch of Akiyushi steaks. They grow in your backyard.
Exactly. That would be
find them in your couch cushions.
We'll get into that a little bit later, but I just think it opens the door for a team where money is no object to say, all right, we'll pay $100,000 if the guys want to practice that day. Practice. If we want to leave at midnight instead of 7 a.m. so that everybody can get there and sleep, let's do it. We'll just pay the fine. And not saying that owners are going to think that way, but it wouldn't be out of the question for somebody to say, I'll pay $100,000 for a competitive advantage in a big game.
Here's a question for you. Number one power play unit when Kirill Kaprizov comes back. So obviously Faber replaces Spurgeon. What do you do with Marco Rossi? Like, does he go to that number 2 unit, or does he replace Zuccarello or Boldy?
No, you can't do that.
What about Boldy?
That would be the only spot that's possible. But to me, that you'd have 2 options, and one would be to move both Rossi and Boldy to the second unit and try to create 2 units. Maybe let Johansson play that spot that he used to fill in down low for Backstrom when he was hurt in Washington earlier in his career.
The only reason why I think that doesn't make sense is just because the number 1 unit eats up so much time.
It does.
So
but that's what I'm saying is one option would be to move both of those guys and try to balance it more with 2 power play groups. But if you're going to continue the way you're going, we saw a difference the other night. Having Eriksson to win the faceoffs, and Marco Rossi's faceoffs have been getting better and better and better.
12 last night,
and he's like 1 faceoff below 50% now for the season, which is actually a better number than Ek. But what's misleading about that is Ek takes a ton of draws in shorthanded situations and on his offside, so he's still the guy you want to win faceoffs. But we saw it on the power play. Winning that first faceoff and starting with possession makes a world of difference. And when power plays are off, so many times it's when you can't win the first draw. Now you got to go back and get the puck. Now you got to try to gain the zone again. And you see teams, all it takes is a couple disjointed zone entries and you've lost a minute, and now you're on to your second group. So for me, at least to start, you got to give Boldy the first crack at that spot rather than Rossi. As good as Rossi's been down low and around the net, but the other option. So I think there's 3 options. One would be which I think is most likely, that Rossi's the odd man out. 2 is that you move both Boldy and Rossi, try to create 2 groups, and then the other would be try something where you go 5 forwards and keep all 5 of those guys on the ice. We've seen him try that at different times earlier, a couple of years back, and the return of Eriksson Ek and Matt Zuccarello, though, just changed the power play.
Yeah.
Ek with winning the faceoffs, and everything runs through Zuki on those man advantage spots, and you can just see it. The way he moves the puck around, his vision is so different.
This is crazy to me, but and this just to me because I always take the negative, and you always take the positive. So I
always take the logical.
Yeah. All right. Here's the logical on both. To show you how much of a funk Matt Boldy is in. Marco Rossi now has 32 points in 38 games, and Boldy has 31 in 38 games. This is from Boldy, who was on pace for 85 or 90 points at the start of the year.
He was a point-a-game player for the first 28 games of the year.
Ain't anymore.
No, and he's been fighting it. But like the other night, the Ottawa game, his game was good. He hit 2 posts. He played well enough that night to look like the old Matt Boldy. He's had some games mixed in here where he hasn't.
Mm-hmm. Although, if you think about it, the one goal against that really infuriated John Hines was that first tying goal where Boldy
made a turnover.
Yeah, right. When he was as he said, you're not taking, you're looking at no ice, and you try to force a play to Zuccarello.
And that's where I think Boldy's game slipped was when Eriksson Ek left his line. Mm-hmm. And because if you remember early in the year, the Kaprizov Zuccarello line was doing more scoring, but they were also turning more pucks over. The Boldy, Johansson, and Eriksson Ek line, I thought, was playing nearly perfect hockey. They weren't scoring as much as the top group, but they just never made a bad decision with the puck. If they didn't have something, threw it right back in the corner and kept going to work. And there were a couple times when I asked Hines about Boldy's game, and the way he described it a couple times was he's playing the game like Eriksson Ek because he's playing with him. And when he does that, he's a special player. And I think now we've seen him get a little bit more into the east-west, the trying to make plays at the offensive blue line that aren't there. And maybe it's just
how about that one play in Ottawa where he goes up the gut and then just passed it behind him blindly to nobody for an odd man rush.
And those are the kind of passes that we've seen Kaprizov and Zuccarello
who used to do that all the time? Kevin Fiala.
He did, but those are the plays that those guys try to make, and then they connect enough of them where a coach is like, no. Okay. But Boldy just didn't have that in his game early in the season, and we've seen a little bit more of it creep in. I always kind of look at it to hold judgment until you've got your lines intact the way you want them, because different things make subtle impacts on guys' games. And let's put Johansson back with Eriksson Ek and Boldy. Let them play together for 5 or 6 games.
I was just going to say that to you.
And now all of a sudden, then if Boldy's game still looks off, then you got something.
So let me ask you, would you take a Ryan Hartman and put him on the left wing, or Zuccarello at the left wing and Hartman on the right?
I don't think I would do it.
If you did that, though,
that's what
Rossi and Zuccarello, you'd go with Hartman.
Yeah, probably right now. But I'm sure they're waiting until Kaprizov comes back to make that switch. But there are some times where I would do it even within games and on the road.
I totally agree with you.
Wes and I talked about this before the show last night, that when Boldy's game looks like this to me, that's the switch I would make. And now that you have Eriksson Ek back, I'd put him back there, and at least from time to time. And Hartman's game has been better, and so maybe it's a spot where you just throw him in there.
Or even a Johansson can't be on the line. You might maybe put JoJo up with Rossi and Zuccarello. Then you have a Hartman, Eriksson Ek, and Boldy line, and maybe that works as well. I tweeted that during the game the other day. Like, there just comes a point where I think Eriksson Ek's got to play with Boldy, and I think just to spur him, get him to play a North game.
Well, not only that, but it gives you a second line that can score. So we were talking about this before the game last night. Minnesota's got 12 goals in 7 games. I'd be looking for things to try to spark the offense at that point. And now it gives you, if you do it that way, a Gaudreau with Foligno and Trenyon line, and then Eriksson Ek with Johansson and Boldy. You got 2 lines you can play against anybody defensively. Yep. And yes, I get it that Rossi, Zuccarello, Hartman wouldn't be an ideal line defensively, but it's a line that probably still has enough mojo going the other way, where you wouldn't take away from their scoring ability.
43 goals against in the last 12 games, I believe it is. And let's be honest,
the game's slipping.
Yeah, let's be honest. If Philip Gustafson isn't Philip Gustafson yesterday, that game would have been upside down.
They gave up 21 high danger chances last night. That was the most they've given up in any game this season. And at 5-on-5, 3 of their 4 worst games have come in their last 5 games for the whole season. The Ottawa game and last night's game against Nashville, the 2 worst of the season, 16 5-on-5 high danger chances in each. I thought Gus was great against Ottawa too, but it was 4.5 goals above expected that he saved against Nashville. That's
for a goalie that gave up.
Of.
Yeah, for a goalie that gave up 3.
I had him as the second star for the game in that game, and only because I thought Marco Rossi was deserving of being the number one, but. Wes and I talked about it in the postgame show. He said they gave up 3 goals, and yet we're talking about the guy that was the best player on the ice might have been the goaltender.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you.
We got an interesting number for tomorrow night. So I looked it up. We're going to see this in our broadcast against the Capitals, that in Gustafson's career, the more shots he faces, the better he seems to play. And so I'm gonna call up the numbers here right now. In games in his career where he's faced 39 or more shots, I mean, think about that for a minute.
It's a lot of shots.
It is a lot, but it's 39 or more shots, and when he faces that, his winning percentage is going to blow your mind. When he faces 39 or more shots, he's 10-1-2.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
Points percentage of .846. When he faces 38 or less, he's 49-32-12. So a points percentage of under 600. His save percentage is 95.5 when he faces 39 or more shots.
Holy moly.
It's 90.9 when he faces 38 or less.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Yeah, that is ridiculous.
And his goals against is about 8.8 lower. So it really is amazing. And we talk so many times about sometimes goalies seem like they play better the busier they are. With him, it's 100% fact.
Yeah, it's and he talks about that a lot. So good for him. I mean, he's having a heck of a season. And really, the toughest, we keep on talking about all USA hockey. The toughest decision that Sweden's going to have at the Four Nations is who do you go with?
Who do you go
Markstrom, with? Ullmark, or Gus?
Right, I mean, and it's probably down to Markstrom or Gus now with Ullmark being knocked out. But Gus has been as good as anybody in the league.
Is he long term?
No, but he's just not playing right now.
Right.
So I mean, I think right now the decision would come down to the other two.
Yeah.
But a good segue to go back to what we were just talking about with Matt Boldy, because we've got our Vinny's thoughts for this week's show, and he says he had 3 thoughts. One of them was with Kaprizov out of the lineup, Boldy had a chance to step up and take the reins as the go-to guy, but it looks like he's done the opposite. On the flip side, Rossi has been outstanding when everyone is healthy. Would you put Rossi on power play number 1 over Matt Boldy? That's one of Vinny's thoughts.
No way.
Yes.
All right, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Now Vinny's thoughts when we come back.
Hockey isn't the only thing happening on the ice, and as lakes are freezing over, it's time for ice fishing. OnX Fish offers the most comprehensive fishing tools for increasing your confidence and success on the hard water. Use the Fish app to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential. OnX Fish also shows you hotspots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
Save smarter and grow your funds faster with a certificate from Royal Credit Union. Royal's 4.25% 9-month certificate has no minimum opening balance and a locked-in rate for a guaranteed return at maturity. Open a 4.25% APY 9-month certificate at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 12/5/24, insured by NCUA.
All right, back here, worst seats in the house. Mike Russo, Anthony LaPanta, coming to you from a vacant Starbucks that we broke into, literally.
Right.
And
but so one of Vinny's thoughts was the question. So I'll ask it to you because Vinny's thoughts are more directed at you than me, although he says he wants both of our opinions. I offered mine already. What would you do?
I would
put Rossi in front of Boldy?
Yeah. I would. I just think now a lot of it. The problem is a lot of it would be the alignment. Like what I love about Rossi is his ability in front of the net. And if you take Boldy off, you're probably putting him at a flank. Is he the same threat? You know, we've seen him shoot from out there, but he's more of a high danger guy. But then you got Eriksson Ek around there as well. But you know, I don't think it's bad to have two guys at the net as long as somebody's retrieving pucks.
Yeah, and he's been there with Eriksson Ek here recently in the last few games.
Yeah.
All right. Two other thoughts from Vinny, and one we touched on a little bit, but I'll throw it out the way he talks about it, where he just said, "Is there a punishment that either of you can think of that would actually limit or eliminate dirty hits? A 5-game suspension seems almost irrelevant."
I don't know, because I mean the whole he's out until that player comes back
you
thing
can't
just
do that.
doesn't work.
Because sometimes a legal hit can do that, or a hit that's a borderline hit you could understand how a guy inadvertently throws out his knee and he gets a kneeing.
Although the league has arbitrary things like that. Like double minor if just you happen to cut somebody, but you could clobber somebody in the head and maybe you don't,
Which
make them bleed.
Isn't it crazy that they very rarely call that? They can call a 4-minute high sticking even if there is no blood.
Yeah.
And they
although
just
we've even
ever
seen experiences where there's blood and they don't call it.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know how you do it. There's nothing that could happen to this kid. If he was out 35 games, what's the matter?
It doesn't
Jared
matter. Spurgeon's
out. So I don't know what you do.
Right. And so many times, we've talked about it before, too, that if you started to say that sometimes, let's just say hypothetically that a player that actually had value to Nashville gets suspended. Well, let's say Steven Stamkos gets suspended for 5 games, and Nashville happens to be playing Colorado or Dallas. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a detriment to Minnesota.
Yeah.
To have Nashville go into those games and play without their best player.
Were you you weren't. I don't think you were the play-by-play guy yet, or were you when Jason Pominville got elbowed by Dustin Brown and the reaction is they suspended him for like the last couple of regular season games in Detroit and something which basically meant nothing to the Wild, and then the Wild go into the 2012 playoffs after acquiring this guy, 2013 playoffs after acquiring this guy, and now he's concussed, and what's it matter, right?
Well, it's the same thing
with
happened.
Duncan Keith and
That's what
Charlie
I was just going
Coyle.
to say. Duncan Keith, he didn't play for the last meanerless regular season game for Chicago.
Yep.
That meant nothing.
Yep.
And I thought that was a gutless call because that was a malicious swing by Keith.
That was terrible.
All right, the last Vinny's thoughts, and this one's a tough one. Does the Nashville coaching staff survive, assuming nothing dramatically changes?
I think they survive probably the season. At this point, I hate to say it like this because what I think of Darby and
they're friends of ours.
Yeah, and Todd Richards and all that whole staff. But they probably go down with the ship at this point, right? I mean, they're not making the playoffs. No. So what? Sometimes at this point, you don't want to bump. You don't want a coaching staff bump. You want to just at this point go for the lottery pick. So I don't think that they survive after the season. I don't know about the whole staff, but certainly Bruno.
I always hate to speculate because and you don't know what discussions have been going on behind the scenes, but these are guys that they work hard, that are. Andrew Burnett has proven that he's capable
100%.
of being a head coach in this league, and we know Todd Richards and Darby Hendrickson are more than qualified as assistant coaches, not to diminish the rest of their staff, but these are just the guys with whom we have personal relationships. But there were a couple moments last night. We've seen it with teams here, with Minnesota, where I remember when Mike Yeo was in his final games, and there were some nights where the team looked lost, and it looked like a guy that didn't have any more buttons to push. And I remember, I'll never forget his post-game comments one time when somebody had asked him about, it might have been you who asked the question about worried about his job security. And he said, look, you can't lose every game and expect to keep your job.
Yeah.
And
that might have been the night that he was fired against Boston.
No, it was a couple days before.
It was in St. Louis. And, yes, it was.
And there were just some times last night where we shot the Nashville bench, and the look on Burnett's face was just, I cannot believe how this thing has come unraveled. And we were talking about it a little bit in the broadcast last night. When you look at the teams that are surprising, Minnesota and Washington are two of the three that have made the largest improvement in terms of their points pace right now compared to last year. We're going to talk about that during the broadcast in Washington. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's Nashville and New York. And New York right now is 37 points behind their pace of a year ago. Nashville's 35.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
These are two teams that last year going into the playoffs might have been as scary as anybody with how well they were playing down the stretch. Nashville goes out and adds as many free agent pieces as anybody. The expectations were off the charts. And now you've got a team that a slow start just has sapped all confidence from that club. They play right now like they're expecting something to go wrong. And we've seen that happen with the Wild last year as a perfect example. Started slowly and just could never get over that hump of every night something bad's going to happen.
Well, I mean, and a good example is they all of a sudden they go 4-1-1, and what happened since three straight losses.
Right.
And you know, I'll go back to our predictions before the season. I mean, you were not nearly as high as Nashville as I was.
No, I thought they'd be a playoff team.
And I bought into the Stamkos, Marchessault, and Brady Shea hype. But now when you look at their roster, it's so easy to see like they have no centers. Right. None. They were like banking on on like Tommy Novak becoming a star or something.
Right. No centers, but also just guys that didn't play the game the way that they played it last year when they were so tough to beat. They were a rugged, heavy, structured team, and now you look at that top line of Marchessault, Stamkos, and Forsberg. They have no interest in defending. And Wes pointed out about 3 or 4 examples during our broadcast last night where the Wild, even with some of their lesser lines, got those guys in their own zone. And I mean, you look at all 3 of them; they're all right around -10 players for the season.
Yep.
They're all starting to score right now, and yet they're still -10 guys.
Yeah, it is truly amazing. You know, those guys are alphas, but you know, there's always a concern. Like, I always am of the opinion that the team that the player is on knows better than anybody else. And the fact that Tampa essentially offered Stamkos an insulting 8-year deal ×2 was like, go. You know, that was, we want Jake Gensel, you go. It was, you know, you might as well have just not offered him anything. But when he wanted to stay so badly, but when they just they wanted him gone at this stage.
We talked about that the last time we played Nashville, where when you think about it, Marchessault would have stayed in Vegas in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But they had to make some tough decisions. Yeah. They wanted Noah Hannafin instead.
Yeah.
That was really where all their dollars went after they traded for Hannafin last year. Tampa makes that decision. Carolina had to, and Brady Shea looked good last night, but these are all guys who, at least it appears, would have preferred to stay where they were. They were happy where they were, playing with guys they love playing with, and all 3 landed there. And not to say they haven't gone there and played hard. I mean, they play hard, but none of them were leaving thinking this is a better fit for me.
Yeah.
They all left because they had to leave.
Yeah.
And then you just add guys who they just don't play the game the way Nashville played it last year when they got on that run. They went 21-7-3 down the stretch. And remember when the Wild faced them? I mean, they could not penetrate that crew.
Yeah. Did Vinny have any other thoughts?
Nope, those were his 3.
Let's go to some Twitter questions, then we'll wrap up pod here from Washington, D.C. We got places to be, things to do. Casey goes, Wild fan. This is actually a funny question I just saw. Wild fan from Australia here with Trenyon and the team seemingly thinking Marco Rossi is from Australia. Any likelihood we see Rossi play for the Australian national team and help bump us up a division? That was funny. So Trenyan, I mean, that is an inside joke clearly in the team. Trenyan was well aware he's from Austria, but said Australia. I've heard it before. You could even hear guys when he said Australia and joked. Everybody's like, ship on the Barbie and all that stuff. So that's clearly an inside joke. That's the cool part of the Wild always allowing cameras in the locker room is sometimes a lot of that stuff escapes and gets into the fans start to learn anything. So here's a good question. I got this from a lot of people. Burb asks, I'm an old head. He says for being disappointed that there was no retaliation for the Spurge hit, and a couple other people pointed out, like, if you're going to do that, why don't you next game go after a Yossi or a Stamkos or Marcia? So like that's like really old school thinking. I am not a proponent of that, and part of it is because we know who Jared Spurgeon is, and we know that this guy is a really great guy and doesn't deserve this. And same thing, like Roman Yossi, Steven Stamkos, Marcia Sorrell, like these guys, Philip Forsberg, they don't deserve because some knuckle. It's not their fault that this bonehead's on the team.
This is different. It's not like a pitcher retaliating where
I was thinking that last night.
You hit Derek Jeter, so we're going to hit Joe Mauer.
I was thinking that last night. That stuff doesn't exist,
right? And it can't because of this. What are you going to do? Try to hurt Roman Yossi? No. The next time, if this kid ever faces the Wild again, he's gonna wind up getting run through the wall and probably forced to defend himself. But what was gonna happen? Trenyan jumped over Spurgeon and made sure that the kid, but he was smart enough to know, like, what good is it going to do me to drop the gloves and pummel this kid? I mean, that right now at this point in the game, it doesn't matter. And
even the fact that he nullified 2 minutes of the major was idiotic. That was not a good call by the refs there. And
you easily could have just called roughing both ways.
Yeah, and then the 5 minute major.
And that's what the Wild were so upset about for sure. But there was no way somebody's going to retaliate against somebody else. That's just not how it works.
Yeah, this is not like the old days where that stuff did happen in the 80s and the 70s, but and the 90s actually. But I don't think that's we've seen that before. Like you hear videos of I think it was Delorier saying I'm going after that guy next, and but that stuff.
And there's stuff where guys will say, like, look, if you. And I'm not talking about injured hits. I'm saying, like, if you got some big donkey running around, in fact, I remember a game where Ryan Reeves did it to the Wild, where he was running around taking some liberties against some of the Wild skill guys, and the answer was, all right, well, then our guys they're gonna hit your skill guys, but they're not gonna try to hurt them to retaliate. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and that wasn't that person, but I've seen that a lot on Twitter and asking that question. Gary asks, it's a head scratcher to me why Freddie Gaudreau doesn't score more frequently, as he has great moves around the net. Any idea? I mean, some people just it is crazy. Some people just have that gift, and some people just don't.
Right.
He's like we see in the shootout. He's got immense skills and hands, but there's just
tremendous puck handler. The guys call him phone booth because he can handle the puck in a phone booth, but there are some guys who they're finishers, and then some guys aren't.
Yep. You might know the question of this. I don't think it has happened, but has Middleton been skating at all to keep up his fitness while his hand heals? I haven't heard that he has
but
been skating.
Know when he started, that was one of the things the Wild said is the beauty of a hand injury is that when his hand is ready, he'll be ready because he can skate, he can work out, he can do everything else to keep his cardio up. And it's different than a lower body injury where you might not be able to get on the ice for a while.
I will try to ask that question tomorrow at the morning skate to figure that out. But he's eligible to return January 7th. I keep on hearing later this month of January. I know that he would give anything to just, tape up my hand, do something to my glove and let me play, but the Wild need him healthy. You want him playing at the level that he was before, and he hasn't practiced at all, and the team never practices anymore, and he's not on the trip, so I just don't see him returning anytime soon. He's certainly not going to be back by January 7th. Brian Burke asks, Boldy seemed to go into his funk immediately after, by the way, I don't think this is the real Brian Burke. Right after being named to the Four Nations, do you think he's pressing to prove he belongs? I don't think that. Do you? I don't think that is.
No, I think I really think that it coincides with when Eriksson Ek went out, and we dug into his numbers I think it was 2 games ago, and his shot attempts were down like 2.5 per game from where they were earlier. His shots on goal were down like 1.5 per game, and his expected goals were way down. I think it's just a product of a guy struggling to find his game when he's not playing with his normal centerman.
Yeah. A lot of people have asked about the trade deadline, and now if Spurgeon's, could you put him on LTI and go make a bunch of moves? I mean, the way that LTI works is that, you have to become cap compliant when a player comes back. So the only way that the Wild would have essentially a ton of money to deal with at the trade deadline is if Jared Spurgeon was done for the season.
You use the Mark Stone plan.
Right.
And come back day one of the playoffs, but allow you to be $8 million over because you could replace him with a player at his contract.
Like it's a 3-month injury, but you say to Jared, 4 months wouldn't be.
It might be 3 months and 3 weeks and 12 hours until puck drop.
But
in
if
the playoffs.
there is, which we all hope that any chance that he's coming back this season, then it does not give them free money at the trade deadline. Now, if he is done for the season, the Wild do suddenly, if they put him eventually on LTIR, would have a $7.5 million extra that they could exceed the cap, and that would actually allow you to maybe go add that top 6 forward that everybody wants and a defenseman, depending on how Lambos plays or Juracek or something like that, and other injuries and Middleton's back. But so right now it's way too early to say until we get a timetable from the Wild on what Jared Spurgeon's one dealing with, and two when he could be back. Is the season ending, which today I was led to believe is not. That it could have been worse, but they're not going to know until the MRI. Von Lonster asks, everyone anticipates Chisholm to be traded and not in the future Wild plans. I say he gets re-signed and stays. What do you see behind the scenes? I mean, a lot of it will be up to him because, look, if you come back next year and you got Middleton, Brodin, and Boyum, let's just say, and you've got
Faber.
And then you got on the right side, you got Faber, Spurgeon, and Bogosian. You're coming into the season and you're saying to Deck, you're the 7th again, or you're going to be in the lineup, but you're going to have to wait until there's injuries and things like that. And if he thinks that he can get paid, then obviously he might want to move on. But the deal is that if he gets to 80 games this year, and it actually might be prorated to less because there were some COVID thresholds that prorated this. If he plays 80 games, he's no longer an unrestricted free agent. He's back to a restricted free agent, and then the Wild control it. So then it's just up to them as the reader, as the person asked, do the Wild trade him or do you re-sign him? I think that will be dependent on what his agent wants, what he wants, and all that type of stuff. Here's a good question for you. Gollum asks, what is the best budget eatery within walking distance of the XL Energy Center? I mean, one would be Tom Reed's, 100%. I mean, especially, by the way, on their weekday salad bar. It's so worth it.
The
best in the city.
I don't eat around there very often, away from
I ate at Zamboni's last week or 2 weeks ago. It was good. That new place that used to be Wild, Eagle Street, right?
And I didn't mind Eagle Street before, they
had a white chili there that was awesome.
Really, I haven't been there since
I don't think it was the healthiest for me, but
reopening. I've gone down to a few of those spots down there. They're all like decent, but I wouldn't say anything is terrific that I've had in that area. Even Herbie's is pretty good. I mean, just swing into Herbie's. That's close by. And easy to get
I don't know if that's budget, though.
Well,
sorry, Craig.
I guess it's been a while since I've eaten in there. I stop in there every once in a while after the game, but I had
what's actually really good?
But one time. I don't remember it being ridiculously expensive.
I mean, I like Kincaid's, by the way, but obviously there's Casetas that everybody likes. There's Wild Bill's. That's always budget friendly because I go to the one out by me, and it's not expensive. Relatively. Here's a good question from Dylan. Could you give us an 8-man alternate captain power ranking if guys get hurt? This is really good. So you got Moose and Carell, he's saying. Then it goes to Eriksson Ek, and then either Brodin or Zuki. Who's next? And you know what Dylan Laux from Hockey News reminded me last year? That the Wild had so many injuries at some point. Johansson wore an A last season at some point.
I would. Yeah, I very rarely even pay attention to that.
But if you think about it, it makes sense because it probably at some point you had probably Spurgeon, Foligno, we know were out at the same time, and maybe Carell. So I would think Johansson would be in there. Bogosian would be in there. Who else?
well, we're running
Middleton.
out of players.
Yeah, or Middleton.
Yeah, Middleton for sure. He
yeah.
might be next if he was in the lineup.
Yeah. Maybe Goudreau, Hartman. So it's good. It's a fun question. Not fun though, because actually the way the season's going, we don't want to get there. We asked somebody asked if Kaprizov is still in the MVP race, missing 7 games. You just talked about that. Is there emergency call-ups for the Four Nations? Somebody asked, or could somebody potentially play less with a full bench? No, there is not. The NHL has said no taxi squad, no emergency guys. So you have up until day 1 of the tournament to add guys if there are injuries. But after that, you're on your own, and which I'm shocked that the PA wanted this. Any other things to talk about, Anthony?
Nope.
There's a bunch of. Nothing.
Nope. I'm just
talk
trying
about
to,
Spain real quick.
I'm excited about Spain.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this last week, but almost everywhere I go now, I have people stopping me to say, "You got to try this. You got to check out this place. You got to." So I started making a list because people were giving me lists of restaurants to visit, vineyards that they liked, tapas places that they liked. So I'm going to make sure that we're prepared, believe me, when you get there. And you won't be disappointed. Come along, and we're going to have a great trip. I'm so excited about it.
Three more quickies that just Alec asks, would Billy be willing to trade within the division this year? I mean, I would think so. Anything. I mean, the Wild Billy has made trades inside the division before, right? Colorado, he did Patterson versus for Ian Cole once. Nashville, obviously, he made the big Bonino trade that got them Huznadinov. I feel like I'm forgetting. Chicago, he got Fleury from them. I'm sure there have been others as well. Utah, technically, did the Jack McBain trade. So, yes. Here's a funny one. Here's a good one. Basket of Adorable asks, which increases the contract offer to Kaprizov more, his production when he's in the lineup or the team's lack of production when he's out of the lineup? That's a good one. And then last one, Mary goes, could you describe slew foot as an intentional injurious act? Yes. So essentially a slew foot is when you take your leg. Didn't Hartman do this to maybe DeBrincat once or somebody and got suspended?
Yeah,
or was that a slew foot or something else?
Winnipeg. Wasn't it? Didn't he? I thought he
Ehlers? That was more of an interference, right?
Well, he had the one off the face-off where he supposedly intentionally high-sticked him.
Yeah, that was Cole Perfetti.
That's right. But I thought he had another.
He had a suspension against. I feel like he got suspended against Ehlers. I don't remember if it was slew foot. I think they called interference. But slew foot essentially is when you take your leg and you wrap it and you put it behind somebody else's leg and then lift your leg to essentially make that person fall on their back. And you sweep the legs out from under somebody. And it is a disgusting play, especially in the sport of hockey. It has long been something that has been frowned upon in hockey, and it obviously happened devastatingly to Jared Spurgeon. Hopefully we get some good news in the next day or so on Spurgeon from the Wild. But that is it. That is the podcast. Thanks for joining us from Washington, D.C. Anthony and I are going to go to the White House and say hello.
See if we got any friends around there.
Yeah, exactly. This has been Worst Seats in the House. Thanks to our incredible sponsors and joining us at the Aquarius Home Services studio. Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, but they do everything: heating, cooling, electrical, absolutely everything, plumbing even. Royal Credit Union, Fellers Ranch, and Onyx Maps. Talk to you next week, everybody.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forgive